Colonel Birdwell.
Good morning, Governor Keene, members of the Commission. Thank you for affording me this opportunity to share with you my experiences from the events of September 11th. It's almost also my distinct honor to be representative of those in our national defense, Pentagon, and those currently serving overseas right now. First, let me establish where I was located inside of the Pentagon at the moment of impact of American Airlines Flight 77. You have a slide inside your packet that I've provided that gives you that layout. Inside the attached slide, you'll see the impact point. Go ahead. There you go. You see the impact point of the E-ring, the outermost ring of the building. To the left of the collapsed structure, my office window is circled in yellow. In the top right-hand portion of the slide is corridor 4. The corridors are the spokes of the building that connect the rings to one another, and the rectangular tan box designated with a red X at the top of the building shows the location of the elevators within the corridor. As I stepped out of the men's restroom inside corridor 4 on the second floor to return to my office, I was passing in front of those elevators at the moment of impact, in fact moving toward the point of impact. The arrow originating from my circled office window indicates the window I was facing at the time of impact, approximately 15 to 20 yards behind that window inside the corridor. As you can see from this slide, I had just crossed the path of the plane in going to the restroom and was just seconds from being in the direct path of the plane at the time of the impact. When an 80-ton airliner traveling at over 350 miles an hour with over 10,000 gallons of petroleum Jet A slams into the building 15 to 20 yards from you, you may also discern that I sit here at the miraculous hand of Christ. In surviving the concussion, being conscious through it, the blast, the fire, the smoke, I'm able to provide for you a glimpse of a ghastly, fiery death that many died that day. By virtue of surviving my injuries, I can provide you the great detail of the physical and emotional trauma of the critically injured. As a husband and father, I can share with you the emotional and physical strain of my wife, Mel, and my son, Matt, as I experienced throughout my hospitalization and continued recovery. Let me share with you a little bit of that experience, if my way. I, too, would offer the same thing that Lee offered to as well, to the family members here in the room today. At the moment of impact, I went in an instant from a well-lit corridor that I had traversed many times to an earthly hell of fire, choking black smoke, physical and emotional pain, and the disorientation, all of which seemed to last an eternity. First was the physical pain of the fire. My body was burned with a 60 to 65 total surface body burn area on my back, legs, face, neck, arms, hands, with approximately 40% of my burns being third degree. Portions of my face and each entire arm required complete grafting of skin from those portions of my body that could donate such skin. The heat, smoke, and fuel vapor within my lungs inflicted a serious inhalation injury on me as well. Second, I was disoriented and unable to navigate my way out of the building due to the loss of lighting combined with smoke that was pouring out of the building. I cannot put into words, there are none sufficient in the English language to describe for you the abject terror and panic that I experienced, not only facing such grievous, life-threatening injuries, but at the same time the inability to escape them. Third, I knew I was facing the finality of my life. I thought about how I had said goodbye to my wife Mel that morning and my son Matt, and how it would be my last. In those moments immediately after impact, I reacted normally with the survival instincts of trying to save myself. I attempted to get to my feet, but when I was unable to do so, given the concussion and blast of the explosion and the subsequent vacuum that had to be filled and the damage that had on my sense of balance. After an undetermined amount of time, I eventually accepted my death, collapsed to the floor, and waited for that, whatever that feeling is of the soul departing the body. By God's grace, I never felt that feeling. Instead, I could feel liquid running down my face, but it wasn't blood. It was cold. In fact, it was water. I'd collapsed into one of the functioning sprinkler systems inside the Pentagon. That water was able to douse the flames on and around me, and I was eventually evacuated for treatment at Georgetown University Hospital. In my written remarks, I wanted to pause and move on in the interest of time, but let me share just a little bit with that with you, if I may, Governor, with your permission, just to share a little bit with you. Inside Corridor 4 on the second floor, there are portions that were still under renovation, portions that were on my right side that were plywooded up, still under construction. Portions on my left were badge access doors that, even though my badge was burned beyond recognition at that point, even if it had functioned, I did not have access to those areas. Forward in the A ring, which is the innermost ring in the circle, or innermost ring of the Pentagon, fire doors had already closed. I was only operating on emergency lights and the will to survive, and God's grace in my still being alive. As I moved, actually staggered. It was not a walk. It was not calm. It was not frantic. I wasn't that able to run. I got down toward about the B ring, where Bill McKinnon and Roy Wallace stepped out of the B ring doors to see if there were any survivors inside the hallway. I was the only one there. Pieces of my skin were still hanging off of me, pants burned, portions of my polyester pants had melted to me. It's not a description I wish to go into greater detail because Roy was rather descriptive of it for me already. They and two other gentlemen carried me to the A-ring through one of the passages that they had within their area. Took me to Redskin Snack Bar. You may be familiar with that, Secretary Lehman. At that point, I was laid down for triage with 5 other seriously injured people. I was the first one evacuated. Fortunately, I had a great Air Force doctor, Dr. Baxter, give me a shot of morphine in my foot, and then the other foot gave me an IV bag. My feet were the only portion of my body that they could determine was not seriously injured. I was immediately evacuated by ambulance inside the Pentagon out to North Parking. From North Parking, taken to Georgetown University Hospital by a Ford Expedition. Inside Georgetown University, I had yet another seminal moment. Major John Collison had accompanied me to Georgetown. I knew that when Dr. Williams, the attending physician there, told me that he was soon to place me under general anesthesia and intubate me, that he was going to do the best he could to save my life, but I also knew that I was facing, in being under anesthesia, that my last words may be those that I now speak. I asked John to take the wedding ring off my finger. It removed skin, it removed muscle, it removed other tissue, but I don't recall it hurting. I don't know if that was because of the morphine that I'd received from Dr. Baxter, or because I was more concerned with the manner of my death and how my life or my death was going to be a witness to those in the medical staff. John took the ring off. I looked at the hospital chaplain and asked to say a prayer of salvation, or actually rather sovereignty of God in my life, not of salvation. We said that prayer, and after that prayer I had the peace of God's concern in my life and His sovereignty in my life to look at Dr. Williams and say, let's get on with it, resting in His sovereignty. I was fortunate, as you can imagine, to be sitting here with you today. I was evacuated to Washington Hospital Center burn unit by ambulance, or by air ambulance, after the FAA had opened airspace inside Washington, D.C. That evening I was admitted, where I would spend the next 3+ months enduring 30 surgeries, 24 days on a respirator, 26 days in intensive care, nearly 90 days breathing through a trach, numerous tank sessions of sterile debridement in a solution of water, iodine and chlorine. And I can tell you that is, short of being a prisoner of war, probably the most horrific, painful experience you can endure. 3 days of maggots to eat the dead tissue off my arms, to sterilize the infection, to give me live tissue, living tissue that the doctors could then graft on top of. Daily physical therapy to the point of requiring a morphine derivative, Dilaudid, prior to each session, in addition to the scheduled pain medications. The physical and emotional, or the physical environment was agonizing, but the emotional pain was probably far worse. seeing the anguish my wife was enduring on my behalf, the separation she endured from Matt, and to complicate that emotional pain was my inability to communicate with her for a good portion of my hospitalization. And that physical incapacitation combined with the pain medications that I was receiving. Mel and Matt had already overcome the immediate torment of those first few moments and hours of watching the attacks. Mel had previously accompanied me to my office when we made the move from one part of the building to the other. She knew that my office overlooked the helipad, and in watching the local news coverage, saw the helipad and the row of windows overlooking it with a fire coming out of it. Mel and Matt eventually learned that I was alive and were quite overjoyed at that. The greatest challenges ahead were dealing with the medical setbacks that are indicative of not knowing if I would survive. In our visits together, especially Matt's, the overtone was always, was this my last chance to speak with Dad alive? By virtue of the hand of the Lord, an outstanding group of medical professionals, presence of my church, and the presence of the U.S. Army family, I sit here before you enjoying the remainder of my life. I trust that you will keep my life and those of other citizens of this great nation in mind as you go about the business of determining how we can improve our processes to combat terrorism. I look forward to answering your questions that you may have about my family's experience. Again, thank you for the honor to be here with you today.